Welcome back, guys. George Morales coming at you, mortgage lender here, licensed in California. And today we're talking about the 3 mistakes to avoid when buying your first home. So it's interesting the way this kind of came to me, or I found that this might provide value to individuals that might be considering buying their first home. Is I've helped a lot of people buy their first home, and either throughout the home buying journey, or a lot of the times actually it happens after. So I've talked to a few past clients recently that, and you just check in on them, see how they're doing, see how their new home is. And a lot of the times they'll share some of the things that are happening with the house, right? And some of these things, sound like things that could have been avoided throughout the home buying journey, and almost feel like mistakes, whenever I'm hearing it from them. And so I've collected some of the things that I hear often with my clients in terms of mistakes, or some of the things that I see as well that I think could potentially help someone that is considering buying their first home, and just some of the pitfalls and things that you'll want to go and avoid. So 3 things, I'll keep it super simple for you. The first thing is buying at your maximum pre-approval. And I talk about this one often, and this is probably like the number 1 mistake that I would try to avoid, is buying at your max pre-approval. Now you're probably thinking, George, well, what the heck do you mean by that? What I mean by that is that whenever you're buying a home, there are mortgage guidelines, right? And mortgage lenders, banks, underwriters, credit unions, they typically have a debt to income ratio guideline that says that you can buy up to X% of your gross income. And the general rule is that banks are often going to allow you to qualify for a mortgage payment of up to 50% of your gross monthly income in many situations, especially if you have no debt. If you have no debt and you're using conventional financing, and let's just say you make $10,000 a month in gross income, a lender is going to allow you to qualify for up to a $5,000 payment, which is half of that, right? But what do we know about gross income? We don't bring that home, right? That's not our take-home pay. It's before tax money, right? And so when you're making $10,000 a month, depending on your income bracket, your tax situation, where you live, etc., your deductions, you know that your take-home pay might be anywhere from like $6,500 a month to like $7,000 a month. So if you're taking on a $5,000 mortgage payment, that just goes to show you how much more you're gonna have left for other things outside of home ownership, and other things outside of your housing expense, right? And we all often hear that term of being house broke, right? Being house poor. No one wants to be that, right? So the number 1 mistake is buying at your maximum pre-approval. We don't see our gross income. And when it comes to home ownership, yes, there's your mortgage payment, but there's also other things that I think people forget about. And this is one of the common ones that I hear when I talk to my clients that I've helped purchase in the past. I'm talking to them about what's happening with the house, and like, oh, this broke, or this happened, or we've got maintenance now that we have to take care of, or housekeeping that you don't necessarily need, right? But it's a good nice to have. And if you can, buy within your means and afford that, then why not have the ability to go ahead and add that on, right? So maintenance, there's utilities obviously, but there's things outside of home ownership, like I mentioned. Groceries, you still want to have fun, you still want to be able to travel. There's no fun in owning a home if all you're doing, if you buy at a point that's above your budget, there's a point where you're literally just working to be able to go ahead and make the mortgage payment, right? So if you're always at work, working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week to have to make that income or that money to be able to make your mortgage payment, then what's the point of home ownership? You're never in the home, right? So house poor, don't be house poor, don't be house broke. All right, and so the number 2 thing is not doing inspections. So this is a mistake that can cost you, could be very costly, it can be expensive, and I think it's something that I think people think, yeah, this is something that doesn't necessarily have to be done, which it doesn't, but I've seen people regret this. So not doing inspections. What inspections am I referring to? I'm referring to home inspections, pest inspections, sewer lateral inspections. When you buy a home, you have the ability to hire someone, pay them a few $100, and they'll do an inspection of the home to figure out or to confirm that it's in the condition that the seller is advertising it as, and also allows you some opportunity to negotiate. But what are some of the reasons why people don't do inspections? The number 1 thing is there's a cost to them, right? Each inspection on average in the Bay Area or in California is going to be anywhere from $400 to $700, depending on the size of the home, the type of inspection, the area you're in, the person you're using, etc. And so especially if you're a first-time home buyer, you're chances are that you're probably tight on funds. You might not have a ton for your down payment, for your closing costs. And so you're trying to save as much money as you can and avoid any unnecessary costs, right? So the number one reason why people don't do inspections sometimes is the cost to them. They each cost a few $100s. But the thing about this is that they can save you thousands of dollars. Like if you pay $400 to $500, $600 for an inspection, and that home inspector or that pest inspector finds that there's $10,000 worth of work that's needed, your realtor, you yourself can go back to the seller and say, hey, I need these things taken care of. And that $400, $500, $600 expense that you made or that you paid for that inspection, it's all worth it now, right? Because you just avoided $10,000 in future repairs that you might have to take care of a few months after buying the home or a year after buying the home. Who knows when that's going to happen or when that thing is going to break that the inspector talked about. So it can save you thousands and thousands of dollars. Then the second reason why people don't do inspections is new builds, right? You're buying a new build or you're buying in a new build community. It's a new home. They just got done building it. Like what could go wrong, right? Well, the thing is that builders are building at scale. They're building hundreds. If you think about it, they're building hundreds of homes at the same time. So sometimes they can rush through things. Sometimes they take shortcuts, and simply they can make mistakes too, right? Builders are human and they're using contractors and they're using individuals that go fast, and sometimes things don't get done the right way, right? So just because you're buying a home that's brand spanking new doesn't necessarily mean that nothing can go wrong with it. It's also important to conduct your own inspections to confirm that the home that you're buying is going to be good to go for however long you plan on living in it. And the number three reason why people don't do inspections is that the seller provided inspections. This actually should be number two, but seller provided inspections. And so when you're looking at a home and you're looking at these reports, you're like, oh, well, there's already a home inspection that the seller provided, or a pest inspection, or this, that, and the other. The thing to keep in mind with that though is that sellers are in it for them, right? And it's not necessarily their responsibility to protect you in any way, or to, obviously they want to operate in good faith, but they might have hired someone that, is a good friend of theirs, that is an inspector, but you don't know who that inspector is. You don't know how reputable they might be. And so, yes, you can take their inspection reports as well and trust them, but I would personally take them, with a grain of salt, and also get a second opinion. It's never a bad idea to go ahead and get a second opinion, because it's not uncommon for one inspector's opinion of a certain deficiency of something to be way off or be way different than the other one. I just had a client actually that was buying a home, and they were buying a property and they conducted a sewer lateral inspection, and the buyer is the one that conducted the sewer lateral inspection, and there was something that came back, and the report said that there was something that was going to cost thousands of dollars to be able to go ahead and repair, right? The seller decided to do their own sewer lateral inspection via their own sewer lateral inspector, and that inspector said, oh no, this is only a few $100s. This is way different, right? And so that just shows you there's a few $100s, and there's a few $1,000s in differences between two different inspectors. Now, can you meet in the middle, or which one you're going to go ahead and trust? That's all going to be up to negotiation, but this is why it's important to be able to do your inspections. One, because it's going to give you some leverage to be able to do some negotiation if needed, but also it protects you from future costs that you might have to incur. So that's number two. And the third mistake that you can make when buying your first home that you absolutely want to avoid, and some people are going to hate me for this one, but it's hiring the wrong realtor. You don't want to hire the wrong realtor. This can also literally cost you thousands of dollars when you're buying a home. And I see this one, unfortunately, I see this one way too often. I work with a lot of realtors, I work with a lot of clients, and most of my business comes from realtors that I partner up with. And over the last few years, I would say that I think it's a good thing that there's an influx of newer realtors in the industry. And some of them, all of them mean well, but some of them are inexperienced, and some of these things can hurt you. And I'll go over, these things, but you don't want to work with the wrong realtor. A realtor's role, in my opinion, is to, number one, protect you. Number two, negotiate on your behalf to your benefit. And number three is advise or guide you as you make your decisions when it comes to buying a home. Now, the first one is to protect you, right? How does a realtor, or how can a realtor protect you? Well, I just talked about inspections, right? They can protect you by recommending certain inspections. They can protect you by helping you read these disclosures when you're buying a home. And when an inspection reports comes in, based on their experience, they can say, hey, this is something that super minor, no need to worry about it based on my experience. or they can say, hey, this is something major. Like, we need to go back and try to figure something out here because this is going to cost you X more money down the line. And so that's how they can protect you that way. There is something called contingencies also when you're buying a home, such as a loan contingency, appraisal contingency, things along those lines. And so those things also can be used to go ahead and protect you. And believe it or not every realtor is using these tools like, you know, they could or they should to make sure that you are protected. If you have, let's say, an earnest money deposit, which is basically you telling the seller that you're buying their home and you kind of putting, let's say, $10,000, $15,000 down as your deposit to show them that you're operating in good faith and that you're going to buy that home, and you submit that offer with no contingencies in place, that $10,000 to $15,000 deposit, or however much that deposit is essentially at risk. So if you have a realtor that is suggesting that you remove these contingencies, there's nothing wrong with that, because I have clients that do that and realtor partners that also do that. But it's just a matter of educating you and figuring out whether you actually have to, right, to actually protect your money. Because if you remove that and then something goes sideways with one of these contingencies, like your loan or your appraisal, then your money is at risk. Do you have to take that risk? Now it's a matter of making that decision, and it's their job to guide you as to whether you should lead one way or the other based on the situation. And everyone's situation is different. Number two is to negotiate on your behalf. This is a big one, right? Because right now there's a lot of opportunity in the market where rates are high and prices are also high, which allows opportunities for buyers to be able to negotiate, and allows you a little bit more leverage than there has been in the last couple of years. The way that you actually take advantage of this, though, is by having a really strong realtor that's going to be strong in negotiations and knows how to read the scenario and knows the game of chess that you kind of have to play with other realtors that are representing sellers to make sure that they go ahead and get you the best deal, whether it comes on price or whether it comes to providing a credit, the seller providing a credit, which is essentially money that can be used towards your interest rate or towards your closing costs. And so you really want to have a good realtor that is going to be not only able to and has a skill set and the knowledge to know how to negotiate this stuff, but you want someone that's going to be willing to, because I hate to say it, not every realtor is willing to negotiate this stuff. And it's unfortunate because everyone has bills to pay, everyone has to make a living, but unfortunately some of them just want to go ahead and get a deal done, right? And some of them are okay with reaching out to, let's say, the realtor that's representing the seller and saying, hey, how much does your seller want? And the seller says, I want this much money. And your agent goes back to you and says, hey, the seller wants this much money. You want to pay for it or not, right? And if you say yes, then great. It's a deal that's done and everyone's happy, but could you have gotten a better deal, right? And I think having someone that understands that it's all a negotiation and pushing the limits enough, not enough to not so much where the transaction doesn't get done and you never buy a home, but enough to be able to have some middle ground and make sure that you have some kind of leverage and advantage and in winnings in your negotiation as well. And then the third, thing that is their role as well is advising you on how to make these decisions, right? So again, there's a lot of decisions that come into play. And if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't know how to navigate these waters. You might be listening to me and thinking like, dude, I don't know what the heck you're talking about when you're saying all these things. Well, yeah, that's why you have a realtor that's going to be there, that's going to help guide you along in making these, what seem like big decisions, because they've done it many times, right? So you want to make sure that your realtor has his best interest in mind and is representing you, not anyone else, not the seller, doesn't have the seller's best interest in mind, doesn't just want to close a transaction. You want to make sure that they have your best interest in mind. And even if this means that you won't buy a house right now, and even if this means that they won't get paid, because if you don't buy a house, they don't get paid, right? And so a lot of the times there's a bias, right? And the decision that they're going to suggest is always the one that's going to keep the deal moving along or moving forward. But when you find someone that genuinely cares and doesn't care whether you buy a house right now or 10 years from now, or whether you buy because they want what's best for you based on your scenario, then that's a realtor that you want to work with. And so with that said, the things I would ask a realtor if I'm considering using someone to buy a house, and something that you should think about as well, is number one, I would ask them how many transactions they've done in the last 12 months. So how many transactions, how many people have you helped in the last 12 months? And were they representing buyers or sellers? Why does this matter? Is because the negotiation is different from buyers to sellers. And I would even say that if someone has represented more sellers, they might be stronger in negotiation. I guess don't bank on that, and don't, that's not 100%, but they generally, the sellers or the listing agents, the agents that are representing sellers, from what I've seen, have a little bit more expertise in the negotiation side. So that's good, but you also want someone that represents buyers. So how many transactions have you done in the last 12 months? And then have you represented buyers or sellers? I would ask them, this is a key one, I would ask them if they can share specific examples of negotiations that they were able to go and achieve for their clients in any of those deals. And by this, I mean, were you able to negotiate a lower purchase price for a buyer? Were you able to negotiate a higher purchase price for a buyer? Were you able to negotiate a shorter close of escrow if you had a seller that was selling? Were you able to negotiate a credit for one of your buyers to cover their closing costs, to reduce their interest rates? What kind of problem solving did you do essentially in these scenarios to make sure that your client got the best of the deal and not just got the deal done, right? Because I think that happens a lot. And then the last thing, and I think this is more important right now, is how will you be paid as a realtor? And this is important right now because starting August 17th, there's going to be some new changes that are going into effect. Some companies are already implementing some of these changes, but essentially what that means is that starting August 17th and onward, sellers are no longer going to be, it was never a requirement, it was always negotiation, but there's going to be more sellers that are only going to be covering the commission for their agent that's representing them. Whereas historically, the seller is typically covering both the commission for the realtor that's representing them as well as the realtor that's representing the buyer. Now, there's going to be some more transparency and some more rules that allow for that transparency that's going to allow sellers to just say, hey, I'm selling my house and I'm only paying for my agent's commission. So now as a buyer's agent, someone that's going to be representing you as a buyer, you might need to figure out how to pay your agent. And most of the time, I would say it's going to be this agent negotiating that, right? And negotiating their own commission, or the seller might be willing to offer to pay them as a buyer's agent. But if not, you might be on the hook for that commission. That commission can be anywhere from 1.5% to 2.5%, 3%, depending on where you're at. So you need to figure out, how are they going to get paid? Because this might be thousands of dollars for you that you need to come out of pocket, which you might already have. And if you have, that's great, and are willing to pay that, that's great. But if you don't have that and are tight on funds because you're a first-time home buyer and maybe don't have a lot, then you need to figure out how that's going to be paid so it doesn't end up costing you thousands of dollars. So 3 things to avoid, 3 mistakes to avoid when buying your first home. 1 is don't buy at your maximum pre-approval, because that's 50% of your gross income. 2 is don't skip out on inspections. This is something that's going to save you, or could save you, thousands of dollars in the long run. And if nothing else, it gives you peace of mind that there's nothing wrong with the home. And then number 3 is hiring the wrong realtor. Do not hire the wrong realtor. Don't just go with someone or work with someone because they're your best friend, or because, well, I guess that sounds kind of bad, but they're your best friend. I hope you have a good enough relationship to figure out whether they're good or not, but don't just work with someone because they're in the family or you've known them for a long time. Really interview someone and figure out whether they're going to be the right person that's going to represent you, like a lawyer would represent you in the court of law. So that's all I got for you guys. Hopefully this was helpful and added value to you. And as a reminder, I am a licensed mortgage loan officer in the state of California, so I can help in all of the state. If you found this helpful, share this with someone that it might add some value to, and I'll see you guys next time.